And we're not going to have anything up so that we can see. So typically during the board meeting, should we go ahead and turn things on so we can see things, or just?
You want to watch yourself on the screens, or?
Well, not. Sometimes it's helpful to see where the owl's going to.
Oh, okay. Yes, I can do that.
Or if your hair is.
Sometimes also, like if you're eating, it'll really, or drinking, it'll just stay focused on you. So.
Are we a little self-conscious?
Oh.
It is funny, like the etiquette of eating.
Are we good with that just on one screen or both?
I used to attend
How many
a
times do you wanna
conference,
see
a
yourself?
PTA convention, and they would set us up
I
on
think that one's
stage.
good.
Okay, I don't know.
And pictures were only taken when we were eating.
Well, and I think also it'll be good because when we go through the presentation, probably good to have that at 32%. We can see that as well. Or not. Why don't we just go ahead and pass out the papers and what happens?
That's what I would say. No, thanks. I guess it's nice to hear, like, live.
Oh, my God. Okay.
No. What? I didn't know. Oh, I need to.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah, Jason's reviewing it.
If it doesn't, I guess we're not going to have that today, but just maybe for future we'll do it. Yeah. All right. It's not cooperating, so we're just going to go with starting with Article 8. Right.
Okay, ready to go?
Ready to go.
All right. Article 8, I think we're real close on this one. I don't believe there are differences in our two proposals on page 1. Page 2, in C5, so directly above D voluntary transfers, we may have had some differing language there. I think that we were kind of circling around the same concepts, but I don't remember if we had differences, but in any case, this language should match your prior proposal now. The topic being when we have a temporary person, in what instances can we just move them into a position instead of going through the full interview process? So I think that the language or the wording was slightly different in the last draft that you gave us, and this should match. I believe we were the same in D1 through 3. D4, we still have not accepted the language. Language there, now again, we're talking voluntary transfers. In the event 2 or more employees apply for the same voluntary transfer position, and they're equally qualified, the position would go to the most senior. I think that was the most recent kind of version that you had presented. And a couple of things on this. We've talked quite a bit about how we don't use seniority as kind of the determining factor in placement or assignment. We do have that language right now in the filling of vacancies. It appears in C1. When 2 or more applicants are equally qualified as determined by the district, the job will be given to a current district employee over an external applicant, or the most senior if they're both internals. But it's different when we're talking transfers. I don't know how we would determine in the same way that people, or how we would demonstrate that one person was more qualified than the other, because in a voluntary transfer situation, there are no applications. There's not a formal application process. There aren't interviews. It's basically a letter of interest or filling out a Google Doc saying I'd like to transfer. So it doesn't look the same as when we go through 2 full-blown, or when we go through a hiring process and I've got all of Debbie's application material, I've got all of Melody's material, we've interviewed them, and there can be an assessment. Okay, what are the relative qualifications here? The voluntary transfer process doesn't look like that. So applying the same sort of rationale or standard, like, hey, if 2 people are equally qualified, the most senior gets it. It doesn't really work in that same manner when we're talking voluntary transfers. And I think, what I'm hoping that we can move off this one just for the sheer fact that, as we've talked about during bargaining, nobody could remember a time where we had 2 or more internal people vying for the same internal transfer. I think, Saida, you said we've had 5 transfer requests, not for the same position, but just in general. So it feels like we're hunting for a solution to a problem that doesn't exist on this one. And so, for all of those reasons, I think we're just hoping to move forward with current contract language on that. And then I don't believe there are any differences in the remainder of the article. I really think it was just that what would have been D4, and then perhaps we had some differences on C5, but we've adopted your language there. So that's Article 8. Happy to answer questions if there are any.
I don't see any coming from my team. I'm sure we'll have some. In the counter.
Okay. Article 15, the other article we were presenting on. Does everybody have Article 15? Great. So we have more places in this article where we're still trying to resolve some differences in language. So I'll try and highlight those. Hopefully I'm remembering all of them. It has been a little while. The first is A6, and we're talking about the use of your sick leave for family purposes. For whom can I use my own sick leave for? And we are still proposing to stick with the Oregon Family Leave Act. However, that is defined at any point in time, that definition expands. I've never seen it contract. So I think that the main difference there is probably siblings. And again, we're looking at who, in this area, it's who are you most likely to have direct caregiving responsibilities for. I know that that changes depending on your family. Families are different, so we're making some generalizations. But unlike bereavement leave, where it's a more expanded list, who might we need to take bereavement leave for, the use of sick leave, your own sick leave for caregiving purposes under the Oregon Family Leave Act, again, is geared to who are you most likely to have direct caregiving responsibilities for. Could somebody have that for their sibling? I'm not saying that's not possible, because obviously, that does exist, but in general, spouse and children, grandchildren are the ones focused on in the Oregon Family Leave Act. And so we'd like to stay with that. So that's one place where we have a difference. The next, if you look at the top of the next page, here, I think we were, as a group, doing some good work on, the possibility when people had to take sick leave and perhaps they were not too ill, and there were duties that were time sensitive and had to be done, having the ability to do that work remotely, not get charged sick leave. And so this language is as you last presented it. And so I think some of the pieces that I'd highlight, we had previously said such allowance shall be completely at the discretion of the supervisor. And you had pointed out that saying be mutually agreed upon made more sense, because we don't want the supervisor to be dictating to somebody that they engage in activities when they're on sick leave. So we made that change. And then we had proposed shall not exceed 1 day. And you had proposed back be considered on a day-to-day basis. I think that our team felt like that made sense, because I guess if there were real time sensitive things that had to get done, we just want it to be a check-in for each day instead of a more of a long-term sort of an arrangement. So considered on a day-to-day basis, we felt like was good language. So that is, I believe, your language as last proposed. Down into personal leave, we've modified our proposal there. We've had discussion in what would now be in B3, about the fact that, if people are denied, I think you had proposed rolling the personal leave forward if it was denied. And if we're having situations where people can't take personal leave because of lack of availability of subs and things like that, it doesn't feel like rolling it forward and having more days the next year is really going to help the situation. We proposed a different solution, and that is paid out at the value of that day in their June paycheck. But if you look in B3, our proposal there is if they're denied a personal leave request, which is what you had proposed, but we've added and a mutually agreed upon date cannot be identified for the employee to use. So, in our opinion, there should still be some attempts to use that day at some point during the year before we come to the conclusion that it's impossible, so we're going to just pay it out instead. And so, it's mutually agreed upon date, meaning that the supervisor can't. That's editorial comment about my presentation. The supervisor wouldn't be able to say, hey, Debbie, you have to take this personal leave day on May 20th. It does say mutually agreed upon date cannot be identified, but just because you couldn't use it on October 10th when you would have liked to have used it, I think our expectation is still there may be opportunities throughout the duration of the year where that day could be taken. But if it can't, then it would be paid out in the June paycheck rather than rolled forward. So that's new in this proposal from us in response to your proposal on carrying it forward. I think we saw the difference in F, bereavement leave, and the window to use bereavement leave. We are still proposing 60 days because that is the period that the OFLA targets for how long of a time you have to use that bereavement leave. We do have the language except in extenuating circumstances on a case-by-case basis. And so if there is a reason, as this last 18 months, we have had some of those situations where we can't have a memorial service because of the pandemic. I think we're hoping we're past that, although you never know. So if we get back into that cycle, but we've also had situations where people, many months after the fact were wanting to use bereavement leave, like I'm going out of town on a celebration of life and we're taking this trip, and it might be 6 or 8 months after the fact. And we don't really see that as a bereavement leave, as much of a bereavement leave situation as this leave is intended in the contract. And so, again, the statutory window is 60 days. We think that would serve us well. So we're sticking with that. So I think we have a difference there. And then the last place where I believe we're different in our proposals, I think we have now similar language on disability leave. We had worked on that. That's section I. We had worked on updating that language because it had felt somewhat antiquated. Long-term leave without pay, we are the same there, reducing the 5-year requirement to 3 years in order to access that leave. Not real sure why we had that 5-year requirement. Then we get to sick leave donation, and that's where we still have a difference. I know we've had a lot of conversation, and a lot of it, I think it was fairly intense conversation about sick leave donation and how it should be used. We've added down in ends in O on the last page, employees shall be entitled to paid family leave in accordance with Oregon law. And as I said last time, we have a full 12-week paid family leave scenario coming online starting in 2023 that we believe would cover those situations where it's a family member who you need to take leave for. So with that legal benefit arriving, we see that to be the proper way to address those situations rather than the sick leave donation. I think the sick leave donation from our perspective is a gap filler to cover situations that aren't already covered by some other form of leave. We're about to have that other form of leave. And so you would have had that, employees would have had that right with or without the contract language. But with O, I guess for us, it's notice to employees, hey, you have rights to paid family leave in accordance with Oregon law. So for people to be aware of that, know that they can access that. It is 12 weeks of that leave. I think that's all we were still working on in sick leave donation, unless I'm missing something. I think the other language was mostly editorial cleanup. And then absence due to quarantine for individual employees, I believe is the same in our two proposals. Unless I'm missing something. So I know that's quite a bit on that article, but hopefully I've hit those pieces where we still have differences.
So could you repeat again that Oregon law goes into effect what 2023?
Yeah, one more calendar year. Other questions on Article 15?
For P, is that, are you accepting our language on?
I thought that our language was the same there, but I don't have it side by side right now, so I'd have to
Okay.
make sure on
It
that.
is the same from our last proposal, so it's just,
And that's what I thought.
okay.
Can I say something? The live stream is
Yeah,
not.
I just got a couple emails about that. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
okay.
restart
I've
it.
been getting emails.
Yeah, it's just
Okay,
saying
I'm
that.
so sorry. I'm gonna restart it and see if I can get it to work.
Okay, that's okay. We just.
So sorry, guys.
No worries.
So those were the two articles, Article 8 and 15 were the two that we had been on tap to bring.
Again, I'm sure we'll have more questions as we
Sure.
delve into our county. But we appreciate the movement.
We're good. We're online, yeah.
So, do we have these? Or we print them out?
Oh, no, I have one. I'm sorry.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and pass around one. Anyone has around Article 19, which we. Let's go.
Sean?
Oh, you're welcome. Morgan did a great job again.
Sure did. Yeah, they sure did, yeah.
Is that it? huh?
Yeah. That's the only reason I got out.
Uh-huh.
Oh, really? Try to avoid it.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. Yeah, it's early.
Yeah.
Wow.
Does everyone have this one?
We do.
Yes.
All right, well, this one's easy. I think after long discussion, that we kind of come to an agreement, we agree with the last. Totally good. Thank you.
Great.
So,
We're taking this
we are.
Let us never bargain about what pants from other people are. Again.
Oh, please, yeah.
No, we appreciate the.
Well, there's not snow days.
That's true. That is true. We bargained about that last night with the license.
Oh.
All right, great. Good to get another one checked off.
Thank you.
Relative.
Article 20.
Oh. Because I'm getting a text right now from Maribel, she keeps texting my picture from the camera. I'm a Carol fan. It's like, well, get the camera off.
I think it's on everybody else's side.
Okay.
Like it does a
No,
panorama.
it's pointed right at Carol.
Yeah.
Always.
It does a panorama.
Yeah.
Because it picks up my keyboard, I think, and so then it focuses like
Oh.
over here.
Nice.
It's missing you
But
though.
it doesn't,
I know,
it's.
it's not the smartest owl.
No, you can always come sit on our side if you want. That's too funny. I was gonna say, some people's hair looks good too. I think we gotta get Maribel something to do.
So does everyone have
Yeah, I think
the
so.
beloved Article 20?
Yep.
So we're close on this. The only real difference between ours and yours is that we're still holding on to that per calendar year. Under E. It's hard just because we feel like, especially this summer, and I know the summer was an odd one. But there were just so many trips, and we still feel like, by making this small alteration to this article, it would sort of keep summer trips, within the kind of rubric of the contract and within, also keeping it, seems like within, more solidly within the transportation department. I know that's a change for you guys, and we're certainly willing to answer questions to it, but it's something that, that our drivers certainly notice. And I don't know, I mean, it's hard, because it's, on the one hand, like last year, we said, oh, we'll never ever go like this again, and now we're at the end of the year.
Mhm.
It was very much like last year. So it's hard to say that, this was sort of like a one-off thing. It's hard, So aside from that, though, I think we're in agreement on C4, C11.
So one thing that might help me, because I'm not as involved in it, and I think this is both from Carol as well as your team. So this past summer, or what is the concern that people had signed up for summer driving and didn't have enough work? Didn't have, and I wanted to drive that trip, but you used a charter to drive that trip, and so I didn't get as much work as I wanted to during the summer? Or what's?
We did get some people, really pissed about upset about the charter buses.
Yeah.
They felt that they could do it. So, and I know that Carol on her side said that they couldn't get drivers, and maybe on some of them, I'm not doubting that, that some of them are harder to fill. But I think also, what can be important on here is that, in the events that requests are made for transportation outside the parameters of the above agreed upon language, parties agree to engage in discussion prior to approving those trips. So, like if there was something that happened and you needed a charter bus because there was I feel like the union would be open to have a discussion
Mhm.
about that. Like, we just don't, we don't feel that it should be totally, just a whatever, that we just feel that would be better for our, keeping the bargaining work in our, classified.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to understand what the exact problem was. Was it like, I'm sitting around, I'd like to be driving, but you instead are using this other company to drive? So I didn't get to work when I wanted to work. Is that?
We did have people come to us and said, I've never been contacted. I told them that I would work. I could work like an offshoot trip. I couldn't do an everyday route. And this is what we're being told, and so but nobody called them.
Mhm.
Well, and part of the problem is that they need to tell us that, so they know that we know that they want to work, because, and granted, the motor coach thing this last summer was an anomaly, and majority of which transportation did not know was taking place. Those that I do know about, that I was contacted about, we could not have done, because it interfered or we didn't have staff. If people are telling you that they contacted us and they didn't get work, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not buying that. I mean, we were struggling that much. And the thing is too, is that people, you know, who say, well, I'm gonna take the summer off, if they change their mind, they wanna work, they need to let us know, because those that did, we put to work.
We told them to contact you guys.
So it's,
That's the report.
you know, we're not.
That's the first
figures.
thing I do is tell them, you
Yeah,
gotta let dispatch know,
Exactly,
you gotta let.
exactly. You gotta let a supervisor know that you
Right.
wanna work. Because we do not have the staffing to go through and make phone calls to the 200, you know, drivers, do you wanna work? When you've said, when you've already told us for the summer, you didn't want to work, which, and this last summer, I get it. I mean, we were all fried that we had a lot of people that do usually work the summer, say, you know what, I need a break. And I certainly can't fault anybody for that. It was a long, challenging school year.
Right, and I think there was a lot more extra programs with
there
extra
was.
funding that we
Oh, there
normally
was.
don't have.
Yes.
So, and that's
Yes.
another reason why I think per calendar year, or, I'm sorry, per school year would be, we'd be fine with that.
And I can also.
With
tell
an
you-
option that just, you could come to us and say, hey, you know, I mean, I work in that department, we work in that department, down there. We know that, you know, there are times that nobody wants to do it. You hear on the radio, you know, we need a driver, and nobody's offering to do it.
Yeah.
You know, my God, if there's a trip that has to be done and the kids have an opportunity to go to, you know, to some fun event, nobody from the union wants to stop that,
Sure.
you know.
And I will tell you this, that since last summer, things in the process for getting charter buses has shifted. Now under my umbrella, and we have put changes in the process to be sure that this is an anomaly. And I think that part of the admin team that, you know, outside of transportation, that was overseeing summer, now understands the process better. But I think that we put systems in place to hopefully have anything like, you know, that happened, you know, that, but there was just so much money given to re-engage kids.
Right.
That we did more summer programs than we have ever done.
Yeah,
And
and
it was a challenge.
I think that's a good example of why we've never really looked at the summer driving as work covered by the contract. Because it's not part of people's, you know, when you get hired as a bus driver, we don't force you to work during the summer. It's not like, hey, if you're hired, then you're gonna be working July and August also. And it's so cyclical. It's so dependent on funds that are available or different programs that are available. Some ebbs and flows to that. So, I mean, I guess that's why we've never looked at it as this is work that is covered by the CBA. I mean, I think in theory, we could have drivers from Beaverton, drivers from Sherwood, whoever, that could also sign up to do summer driving for the district. And you know, we probably don't have that just because there just aren't, there's not a lot of drivers out there.
On like a normal year, how many charters do you think might happen in the summer?
In a normal year, none, none.
I mean, it's a very different situation than this language was originally bargained for. If people can think back to, you know, the genesis of this language was, it's during the year, we have a school bus that we could utilize and a driver that we could utilize, but for whatever reason, there's a desire to use like a full-on charter bus, right? I mean, when this was bargained, I remember it was like, the football team's going to the state championship and we want to send them down there in style. So we want, or it's a really long drive or something like that. So we want some fancy bus or some charter bus to take them. That's when this language came to be, not what do we do during the summer and how do we cover that summer work. I think that's the struggle we're having, is not seeing how the two situations kind of fit together.
I was also thinking too, last summer and its anomaly was quite different than we have ever had. Typically, we have, migrant summer school programs, some extended year, and, maybe a dual language program, so it's a smaller number of students. Well, we were charged with trying to create space for kids to be ready for school, and so it felt like every school was doing something, and people really felt like we needed to have some field trips and things like that, because kids had not had those experiences. And so instead of having a handful of schools, you now are looking at like 36 schools, that are now in some capacity trying to do some interim components in the summer to help support kids and also make it engaging and fun. And so I think that was the unique piece of this. Because if we go back to historic information, it's just zero. And the charter buses in the summertime.
Yeah, I mean,
The other component to that is the timing of it. We didn't even know we were gonna have access to those funds until late May, like mid to late May. There were no agreements in place to receive those funds. So I mean, it came super quickly, and that ability to plan and be responsive to that, I mean, that's just one more weird thing about the summer, is how late we came into that ability to plan.
yeah. And it really feels hard to have limitations on how we cover that driving unless we can require our own employees to come back and drive. I mean, if we can tell folks, we need you, so you need to come work, that's one thing, but to have limitations on how we cover that work when we can't require that work to be done by our own folks, that seems to be off. And that, again, we've never looked at that work as covered by the contract, because people aren't under contract during those months. We couldn't call Debbie and say, Debbie, I need you in July. I'm sorry, I know you didn't sign up for that, but I need you here because we have these routes to cover, or these trips to cover, so you need to be in. But if we can't do that, then the district has to reserve the right to fill those trips however it can fill them. Whether that's the use of, I don't know who ended up doing the driving or whether they were up, for students or.
I mean, we did do a handful of trips. I think, just to say off what Brian was saying is that remember that drivers are 10-month employees. So we have to hire them, to work the summer. So if people don't, we don't fill an application, but fill out the form, that we have. If people don't do that, then we don't hire them to work this summer. They're off. So, I mean, and even then we were still in a position that we went to people that normally work and didn't sign up to work this summer. So, I mean, he's right. It's like, in theory, if you don't tell me, I have no way of knowing that you want to work. And I think that's the thing, is that it's got to be a two-way street. And even if somebody just says, hey, I only want to do trips, I mean, we have that in our form that they can sign up for.
One piece of this too is a little bit more challenging, because everything we do is the fiscal year of July 1 through June 30th. So to have the calendar year in that creates a little bit more challenge for our visibility to track those uses. I mean, it obviously can be done, but it seems out of alignment with our standards of trying to align with the fiscal year and school year.
My question is, Carol, normally we do have adequate drivers in the summer. I mean, this was like really the first time that it's been that way. And some of it could have been because of, COVID. I mean, I think that caused like, oh yeah, forget that. I'm taking off. I don't want to put myself
I'm tired.
any more risk.
Yeah.
Like, my
And
goodness,
actually, in the last couple of years, we have struggled. Just because some of the summer programs have gotten longer. It used to be, migrant program was literally migrant program, and it was 4 weeks. Now it's bilingual programs, and they run multitudes of different, dual language, migrant, reading, everything is under that umbrella, and it's a longer program. But this year in particular, there was a high number of drivers who I would say are the ones that we always know work summer, did not sign up. We would ask those people, and it was just, they were tired. COVID was a long year. Their kids were going to be off. They'd already struggled when the kids went back to hybrid, to manage it. And I mean, they were tired. I was tired. I would take the summer off, but you know, it's what we do. I'm a 12-month employee, so.
Special education will have a significant number of more students attending
Yes.
summer programs as well this summer and next summer.
Mhm.
So it's going to continue.
Is that because you're trying to make up for services that didn't
Yeah, it's
happen?
because there's an OAR that we have to provide recovery services.
Yeah.
Yep, for during CDL, yeah, if progress wasn't made on IEP.
I don't know, Debbie and Rod, I don't know if you guys heard that this next summer, more of the special education students who are receiving special education services will have summer programs.
Right.
I mean, the reason I was asking about summer trips, you know, like how many charters there were, is I don't know, I mean, and this is somebody, you know, it's something I just mentioned to Debbie, but, and I haven't talked to the team about it, and it's obviously like we've made our counter already with just, you know, the language that we proposed, but I can also envision like a counter from you guys, or maybe another one from us, depending on how far this goes, like where there were a certain number of trips that you guys could have access to during the summer. Right now, you guys have 12 during the school year. Yeah, but what if there was a number of trips that you guys could just automatically get during the summer? And then if you need to go beyond it, just like during the school year, then we sit down and talk.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I have the sit down and talk an issue with that is, I think as Michelle and Carol, I mean, a lot of this was coming up at the last minute. Like, we're taking we need to take this trip tomorrow. And I mean, if you took the extreme example, what if none of our current bus drivers signed up for summer work and we had this limit? It would mean we couldn't drive. We couldn't, because every trip would have to be a summer trip if none of our own drivers signed up, but the contract wouldn't allow us to do it. So we literally couldn't have any of those trips during the summer without the union's permission, if none of our drivers signed up.
Well, I don't think that would ever happen because number one, they don't get paid enough to not work summers the majority of the time. I don't think so. There's a lot of people that work, you know, sure, you can go work a second job somewhere else, and some people do, but you know, all in all, it's like, it's what we do. So normally, you know, we do work, a lot of us do that. I don't know why all of a sudden there's change going on, you know, just COVID, I would
Yeah.
assume.
Well, it was COVID and it was an influx of money for that
Right,
literally was
right,
like the
right.
last minute. That's
Right,
like,
no,
here, do all this
I
summer
get
work.
that,
Yeah.
I get that part, we understand that part. We don't want that to be habitual, right? We don't want that to become the norm, obviously.
So that wasn't money from us, that was money
Right,
from
right,
the
right,
union, so we
right,
can't
right.
control. My concern, and it makes me actually very worried, is that both migrant programs and special ed programs, ESY, are federally mandated. So if we
Right.
couldn't run them because we didn't have busing, we would be out of compliance with everybody's IEP.
Right, but that doesn't happen, I'm telling you, that isn't gonna, I mean, Carol, we have coverage for those.
You know, Debbie, I gotta tell you, this last summer was interesting.
I know,
You
this
know,
last
and-
summer, but
and-
in the
but-
norm.
But right, in the norm, in a normal year, and I can't even think this last summer, we saw a decrease of people wanting to work the summer before, not to this extreme. And so, but we're fortunate the schools work with us, you know, so we can stagger bells and which is what we did this summer too. And, right, I mean, but we have had conversations like, what do we do, you know?
Well, that circles me back all the way to my initial question. Is this a matter where it's like, Debbie's sitting at home in July, like, I wish I could work, and I'm watching these charter buses roll out of the district. How come I'm not on them driving them? Because if they would hire me, I would be doing it. Is that it? Because that's a problem I'm more sympathetic to. Like, I think our first choice is to have our drivers
Absolutely.
drive those trips, but if we don't have people to do them, we can't be limited in how many charters we use if we don't have the folks there to do the driving. And so I never got the sense it was a matter of we had a bunch of people wanting work who were not being offered work.
I don't know the extent, and I just know the phone calls that we received that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like hundreds of them, it wasn't like the entire department called us,
Mhm.
but when we get 2 or 3 phone calls, we have to figure this is at least 2 or 3 more, double that are not calling us, maybe triple that. And it said, well, why are there charter buses going out? I can't work a full route, but I can work a day here or a day there. Maybe a Fridays I can work, maybe during the week, but not on Fridays.
Uh-huh.
And we do instruct them, call Carol, call Jason, let them know. It's work for whoever's on the route at that point.
So is there a flaw in how people sign up for summer driving in the sense that it's like an all or nothing? Like I either sign up to drive for the whole ball of wax or I don't drive at all?
I'm not in that department
No.
myself, but my understanding was that's the way it used to be.
No.
Okay, because that was the message you were
Wait,
getting. as well,
Years
so.
and
All or
years
nothing.
ago, we had a problem that when people would drive up to drive summer, and then they would call in sick or they'd take vacation. I mean, to the point that your program is 4 weeks long and you took 3 weeks of your 4-week program. So that bus has to go, you know, so we have to find a sub. Well, ended up with mechanics and office people driving. Well, they bank on those summer months to get their own job done because they drive so much during the school year.
Mhm.
So the next summer, we had an agreement, and HR was part of it, that you had to drive your, and I think there was even an MOA, MOU,
It was
whatever.
before
it
our
was.
time if there was.
When it said, you have to be available to drive your program. That was one summer.
I think that was just a notice that went out.
It could have been.
I think you might have sent that out.
It could have been.
But,
And then,
but I do remember that.
right, and then, but that was like one summer, and that was like, I'm talking about, good Lord, Janet Hollander was still here, so think how many years she
That's a
retired,
long
probably
time
10 years ago.
Yeah, we're talking.
A long time ago. So since then, it is not that, and in this summer in particular, because like Michelle said, literally, we had 3 weeks to get this together and have it routed. Because summer program started the Monday after we got out of school on a Friday. And so we told people, people come to us and say, well, I could work maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and we'd like, or I can only work mornings, but I can't work PM, but we're like, still sign up, because when we start piecing this together. So,
Right, I appreciate the flexibility that you gave, people
Yeah.
on that. And I also want to say, I appreciate the increase in the wage part of the summer driving. But another thing I'll throw out there is when we work in the summer and drive in the summer, we are not paid the same wage in the summer. A lot of us will take a cut if we do it. And, I think if you're paid the same, if I'm making what I make driving for the district during the school year, in the summer, that I would be more enticed to maybe do it than do it for, $3 or $4 less.
and that was one reason, like this last summer, again, because it was so hard, we did.
And you did good. I'm not saying that was not appreciative. I mean, that
Right.
was, because that was great. But I think, again, if it was, if we were paid, and some people make money, the ones that are making more money lose money. So I think that's,
Mhm.
just throwing that out there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, when I think back to how this language originated, it was literally like, we have a school bus and a district driver who could drive that trip. Sitting there, they could drive that trip. But we've elected to use some charter service instead, a replacement. That's my recollection of how this language came about, but that's not what we're talking about during the summer where, well, yeah, we've got a driver and a bus ready, but we would rather use this other service instead. That's not, my understanding anyways, that's not what was happening.
No, to my knowledge, there was no driver out there that was sitting at home wishing they could work.
It wasn't like we
That
didn't
we
have
knew
enough of our
about.
own buses or something like that.
Because again, I had office staff driving this summer. I mean, if I had people in the wing waiting for work, that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that they definitely had an opportunity to work if they wanted to. And I think COVID kind of, set many people back, but.
And at the top step, I mean, we did that strategically, open, because we knew.
Yeah.
People were tired.
I mean, if I could also just say for the record that, like, to Sarah's point, like we think those programs are great, and we wouldn't want this article to be like an obstacle for next year.
No.
I think that like our worry is that like last summer, there was just a ton of trips. And they were, it seems like they were done outside of transportation, right? Individual administrators were just like, okay, order the bus, you know, send the people on the trip. And that's sort of like one of the things we'd like to avoid, because then the drivers don't even really know the trips are happening. And then a lot of them will see the buses and wonder like, hey, what's going on? And I don't know, I mean, this idea too is like not one that we're proposing, but one that just got passed to me, and it's kind of interesting that you guys might think about, is like under 4, C4, makes sense to make a category for summer trips.
We have a, for summer, we have an entirely separate pick list. So, because again, they're only 10-month employees.
Yeah.
So the pick list that we use during the school year goes away. Whoever says they want to do trips in the summer, that creates a whole new pick list. So that's already happening.
We send a letter of interest to our supervisors if we want to work summer. So,
Through a Google form.
yeah. So once that's done, then they do their own thing and then are able to route that way. I don't know. I forget when that list goes out, but it goes out in enough time to,
Yeah, I try and
I
get
mean,
it
I
out.
think we send it out for the,
Hey Carol, do drivers fill that form out regardless, yes or no, or only yes?
No, they fill it out. Anybody who wants to work it this summer, it goes out to full staff. And whoever wants to work that summer, they fill it out. We don't have a category that says, no, I don't want
It's
to work
all
summer.
yes.
It said only yes.
Yeah,
And that goes, I mean, we send out notification to the entire district multiple times for every single department. So transportation, we had to send it twice. The first one that went out for in March, we didn't get any, like really barely anyone signed up. So we sent it out again in May. And then Carol and her team also do outreach within the department, but all of you received for nutrition services, for
Right.
facilities maintenance, for transportation, for student services, multiple invitations to work summer work. And that's because they're 10-month. So they have that opportunity to work additional summer work.
yeah, I see you shifted from Google form, from letter of interest to Google
To
Forms,
the
I
Google
think, because
Forms.
it was just,
right, because
Much
it's so
easier,
crazy. And then, because then we have to take that whole thing and send it to Hannah.
yeah,
So on a Google form, she can just pull the spreadsheet.
sure, yeah.
And I will say, it wasn't just us either. Nutrition services, I mean, I talked to Nate all summer long, you know, we were commiserating, you know, and custodial, because I know he struggled. They couldn't even run the catering portion of it because he was, you know, people were just tired this summer. You know, it had been a stressful year.
Teachers and assistants the same.
Exactly.
In the program.
And we start promoting summer work with our own internal employees, but once we hear from supervisors that they're not getting our own staff members to sign up, it goes out as a job posting. So we hire from other districts, we hire people from our community because those programs need to happen. And so we want to use our own employees, obviously, first and foremost, but those positions need to get filled so we can provide those services.
You also have to remember too, that, you know, we're also transporting, you know, special needs, but, you know, we have kids that do summer programs clear down in Salem. We also have McKinney-Vento kids, you know, and they're coming from all over right now, St. Helens, Woodburn, a lot in Portland. So we're also transporting them as well. And this last summer, we had more work than we did handle, for sure.
Have you ever had a situation where you turned current employees away who wanted to work during the summer, where you had more people wanting to sign up than?
No, our philosophy is if you want to work for summer, we'll find you something to do. And this year you also, I mean, you know this too, it's like, we also want what we call the wash bay crew or the wash crew, which basically every summer, the buses are, you know, gutted out inside and out and scrubbed down. And we actually did not think that we were going to have a wash crew. And we were able to scrape together, I think there was 3 people that did it the entire fleet.
We also had 2 summers ago when it was like just barely anybody because of COVID. We had like 3 bus drivers who we didn't have a route for, and so they came and worked
Yes.
with us and did
Yes.
PSO calls, so you did
Yes.
find things for whoever
Yeah.
has signed up.
Okay, thanks. I mean, it helps for me to understand this situation a little bit more, to know what are we really getting at here.
And also, one other thing too, that we have staff that instead of driving, they have gone to work for facilities too in the summertime. So, you know, there are some staff that are working, but they're working at facilities.
Is that because of differences in pay rate or is there?
Facilities, it's in the summer for them, it's actually a lower rate,
Yeah.
but it's full-time.
More
So
work,
it's,
More hours.
those are the people that you see who like, you know, need to work full-time for the summer.
Yeah, it's more hours, but less, yeah.
But like,
Yeah, I
and
think a
it's
lot
a
of it goes,
significant lesser wage.
yeah, a lot of it goes to money. I mean, that's, you know, I mean, that's the fix for everything, right?
Yeah, did you guys want to take a break? So on our agenda now, we flipped things around, but we were gonna take a break at
Yeah,
this point.
sure.
Okay.
That would be great.
How long of a break do you guys need?
Oh, a couple
15
hours.
minutes?
Yeah.
1 hour, a couple hours.
Come back at 10. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
And now to you, Rob.
Okay, so do we have economic, should I, are we passing it? Should I do my spiel first? Oh, yeah. So we're just having a discussion, actually, John mentioned this, it's an interesting idea. And this isn't obviously something that would be covered in the contract, but like, it would kind of get to the point that Sarah was making and Michelle. What if you guys had 4 12-month drivers? Like what, you know, and I know that that's really more of like a policy, and you know, and that you have 12-month transportation employees that aren't drivers. But what if you guys made an attempt to hire some 12-month drivers, just so you knew, hey, we're going, you know, we will have X number of drivers every summer. You know, and then they would get some of the benefits of being a 12-month employee. And plenty of drivers, I think, love being 10-month employees. A lot of them have jobs where they make most of their money in the summer. And they do it for benefits or whatnot. Yeah, but we just thought it was an interesting idea.
Yeah, you can see
And
why.
it gets to your point too about like, you know, because we don't want the district to be like, no, you have to work if they don't want to work. But if it was something that they could apply for as a 12-month position, then you would have that ability, you know, with those people who, you know, and there might be people who would apply for it, you know, just because of Louisville. So just an idea.
Interesting thought.
Okay.
Hannah? Yep. I have there's a message on the live stream that the audio is very low. Is there a way of turning that up?
Everybody would speak up, that would help a lot. There's not a lot of options.
Audio.
Has that been the case the entire
Yes.
time or just since we've come back?
This message came over at 9:20, so it was earlier.
Yes.
I mean, it's,
We've had that problem in board meetings for what it's worth. I mean, the microphones are in the owls, they're way over there, so.
Right, right.
You're-
And
Yeah.
pretty-
Protect to that.
yeah, when we're speaking individually, speak up. Something Jordan said too, like sometimes you want to have like a conversation and, you know, maybe make it a little softer, but just, we're just gonna have to use our teacher, educator voices.
we'll just get some cordless mics, we can just pass them around.
There are some technology upgrades now.
I did like the zooming in after preference that I could see.
So, okay, thank you.
All right, cool. So we've been bargaining for a while. This is actually one of the longer bargaining sessions I've had. The irony is that I think the shortest session I've ever had bargaining contract was with Brian.
Scappoos.
And now I think this is probably the longest bargaining session I've ever had, in terms of overall time spent at the table. We haven't come close to my, like, it was 36 hours straight, you know, and I'm hoping we'll need it. But it has been within some really weird contexts, you know. It's been like, I mean, we've been bargaining almost nonstop since COVID started with one thing or another. You know, and bargained a lot of, I think, really good MOUs, LOAs, whatever you want to call them, and to kind of deal with like the really strange times that we're like living in. And we're still like stuck in the middle of these very strange times. I mean, often the term like the Great Resignation has been used a lot lately, you know, of having a lot of people who I think have like, you know, there's been a big kind of shift in priority among, I think, American workers in general. And I think that for a lot of people, they realize that, you know, that there was some life and death, you know, like decisions that were being made in terms of like, you know, that they could possibly get exposed to a virus that might kill them at work, you know, and I think that that's certainly led people to, you know, to resign more, or to, you know, it's led to kind of the staffing crisis that we're now in. You know, but it's also interesting too, because I think that like there were unemployment benefits, there were a lot of different factors that I think that caused people to sort of like stay home and maybe reevaluate their lives a little bit. People have also had more of an opportunity to work from home, and I think that that's probably led to a greater work-life balance. You know, there's a lot of factors involved in it, but I think that we need to recognize that these are, you know, these are definitely strange times. But it's led to a real, like, you know, crisis for the district and districts all over and employers in general, of how do we keep people, you know, in their seats, so that we can do, you know, perform the services that, you know, as a district or as any number of employers need to perform. It's been a real challenge. You know, and we've seen like a lot of school districts in the area give fairly large bonuses, you know, to people like special education assistants or drivers, to try to like incentivize them just to stay at work, you know, for the school year. We've had discussions with you guys about that, you know, and I think that we, you know, as a team sort of like made the decision that, you know, that one-time bonuses are not, you know, are sort of a Band-Aid approach to a much bigger problem. You know, and we also know that like increases in wages is something that goes on for the, you know, for your career, for your entire tenure with the employer. You know, whereas the one-time bonus is gone, and it's still expensive, you know, but it you know, and it all comes from the same pot, you know, so. You know, so we had this discussion with the district, and certainly a fair amount of our members were sort of like, hey, Beaverton is giving these bonuses. Where are our bonuses? You know, to their credit though, I mean, we've had some pretty well-attended meetings lately where a lot of our members said, you know, spoke, you know, pretty passionately about the fact that a bonus was not a great idea. You know, and I appreciated that. You know, because it shows a kind of a depth of understanding of, you know, the impact of that kind of thing. But I think that, like, you know, and this is something I expressed to Mike, you know, that sort of in the absence of bonuses, that there are some really pretty high expectations for what's going to come out of contract bargaining. in terms of like, economic gains at the table. It's also like something I think we also need to recognize that it's, it's somewhat ironic that, that we're calling it a GSI, general salary increase. When it's been called a COLA for the longest time, cost of living, adjustment. And I understand your guys' argument for that. It's an argument I've heard across the table for years now in terms of, I think sadly, a big reason we are, and I've said this before, probably at this table, a big reason we are where we at as a society is because we've kind of become decoupled from what the, what the cost of living is in terms of our wage increases. And really like the original idea of COLA was to just keep up with inflation. And that the real, raise that you got over, over the course of a year was really the step increase that you got. And I think that, you can very easily like chart cost of living increase with wage increases, and the cost of living has skyrocketed above what most people have gotten in terms of, COLAs. And that's a problem, and that's why as a society, we have less spending power today than we did in the 80s or certainly in the 60s or 50s. But whatever, that's, but there is some irony about us talking about a GSI versus a COLA right now, because right now the cost of living is like 5-6%, extremely high, and possibly going higher. Just over the course of this year, if you look at the CPI, it just marches up. It was closer to 2% earlier in the year. Now it's up above 5%. So there's that context that that we have these increased costs. We have these high expectations. There's all these things that are kind of coming together. We're talking economics at the table. So you guys have made a proposal to us. Personally, I think it's a good proposal. Like it's not, like I think it's decent. I've certainly seen worse opening proposals for management before. But it's I think one of our problems with it overall is that that there are some conflicting priorities in management's proposal, and there's a fair amount of like management priorities that are kind of in there. I'm not saying that they aren't our priorities too. We sat with you guys during the wage study and performed all that work, and we certainly are worried about equity, not just within the district for the the people that work at the district, but also like how our members compare to other districts. So we support that work. But I think the first time I sat down at a meeting with you, actually I think it was at Carol's office at Transportation, first time I met Debbie or Melody, we were talking about the wage study in the context of the MOEA or whatever it was, to give an increase to bus drivers. We were talking about, okay, we have this wage study, that's coming out, that's going to help kind of rectify some of the inequities that other members besides bus drivers are experiencing, vis-a-vis the labor market they kind of exist in. Because there was some wage data attached to the increases that bus drivers were given. And it was it was sort of hope that, hey, we're gonna sit down, we're gonna do this wage study, and we're gonna help sort of like rectify some of those inequities, with the labor market. And I said, like, one of the problems that you have coupling a market study and market kind of wage adjustments with bargaining is that bargaining teams have a selective salary increase on the one hand and a cost of living or across the board increase on the other. And it becomes a very, and I I spent a long time, like 10 years, coming up with these market studies when I worked at AFSCME, where I show bargaining tables, hey, these are the people in your bargaining unit that are underpaid. But at the end of the day, when it was time to bargaining, it became like a choice that the bargaining team had to make between trying to make the wages and, that the employer has more equitable vis-a-vis the market versus trying to get the most bang for the buck, so to speak, for the entire unit. And I think it's hard. And I don't, it's a difficult position for, because we're not going to please everyone, like on the one hand, if we go for a bigger cost of living increase at the cost of, a more selective salary increase, some of the people who are in the study that would get a bigger increase through the study are going to be irritated at us. And if we go for a smaller COLA amount, on the other hand, then there's going to be a lot of people who are irritated at us about that too. So it's sort of a conundrum. I mean, we want to, like, and it also gets to some of the staffing problems that you guys have. With the market study is going to like help, put money into some of the classifications you guys are having a really hard time recruiting and retaining. There's also the bilingual differential. Like, I think for years we've been trying to get a bilingual differential. And we support that idea. But it's also tricky because both the bilingual differential and the selective salary increase from the study are all kind of coming out of the same pot. That's essentially asking the union to take a smaller cost of living increase at the expense of giving some people more money. In a way that's going to like help the district recruit and retain people better, which we also support that, but it's tricky. And also, I mean, some of the other issues that we might have with the market study too is that, because we didn't really look at like a benchmark classification, say like you have like admin ones. If admin ones get an increase, but admins 2 don't get an increase, you don't get the same kind of increase, then you're compressing the wage scale so that, you're kind of pushing up the admin 1s so that they come up closer to the admin 2s. Now, becoming an admin 2 is like a greater responsibility. It's a harder job. But if the difference in pay between an admin 1 and an admin 2 is smaller, what's the incentive necessarily to then apply for that admin 2 position? And so, that's just, I think, one of the structural problems with it. We're not saying that we're just outright opposed to it, but I think it's hard because we know that like all of these things are kind of coming out of the same pot, and really we want it all, we want like a decent wage increase, but we also support the bilingual stipend, absolutely. We also, support the adjustments that would come out of the salary increase that we worked on too. So all these things are kind of in our minds as we're trying to come up with a proposal to you guys in response to your proposal. And our proposal is big. We know that, and we don't want you guys to freak out looking at Michelle. I think what our goal is with this proposal is to like keep as many tools in the toolbox, so to speak, that will allow us to come to an equitable settlement that we can all feel good about. But we know that this is certainly way beyond anything that Michelle budgeted for. And budgeted is always a little bit tricky because it was made on assumptions that were made last year or whenever, it was, and then often the May forecast comes out and sort of says, okay, this is sort of, this is how well, the Oregon economy is performing, versus when the governor came out with their budget. And that came out in May, and that was a long time ago. And there's been other like financial reports that have come out since then. And I know that there's always a difference between like budgeted and actual when it comes to what really ends up, being in the ending fund balance, beginning fund balances for the district, So another thing I want to mention too about the bilingual stipend is that we just don't know exactly like, on the one hand, like it's an idea that we totally support, that we've wanted in the past. But we also, I don't think either side knows exactly how much or how little it will cost. Maybe the 100 people that you guys estimated in the first year could potentially take advantage of it. Maybe that's an underestimation of how many people there are in the district who could potentially take advantage of that. Or maybe it's an overestimate. It's hard for us to say. Maybe there'll only be 70 people, who really not only want it and apply for it, but actually can kind of pass the test to get it. So it's hard for us to feel like that money, which is sort of unknown, is also part of the cost when it gets costed, for us to to have that on the one hand and a cost of living increase on the other. It's tricky for us. We feel like we don't exactly know how much of the pie that's going to sort of take up, or how little. But we're being sort of given a raw number. This is how much it will probably cost. And the same is kind of true with the market study too. I mean, that's a more known figure. But we're also sort of, we have some conflicting feelings about feeling like, these are kind of structural changes that probably should have been made in the past in terms of looking at how you guys are comparing to other employers. And now we're being sort of asked to have that be part of the settlement too. I mean, certainly, and you might look at this and sort of be like, where's the union's priority? And we always send these messages to each other, when we're doing proposals and counter proposals about where our priorities lie. And I don't want you guys to look at this and just say, it looks like their priority is everything. Because I think we're a lot more realistic than that. But we don't want to take anything off the table, really. So there's a couple of points I'll make about I mean, certainly a high COLA, or GSI, whatever we want to call it, is a priority for us because it affects all of our members. And it, and we've heard by and large from our membership that, it's one of their top priorities. And we think that it will also help with recruitment and retention, and ultimately then that will help the district, and its classified members, fulfill the mission that we all have towards the students. So there's sort of that on the one hand. Another thing that we sort of looked at is that I know that there's a 3%, the wage scale has 3% between steps. But we've also noticed that for the licensed staff, that there's a 4.2% increase between steps. So we put in the step increases at 4.2. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's our top priority, but we're trying to say it's a potential that could be a solution that we might be able to reach a settlement around. Likewise, with the insurance cap increase, is that an absolute top priority? I mean, I think we'd like to see, a healthy increase. So we've sort of raised it, we've sort of doubled what the district initially proposed. But I think that there's some other like ideas that we have too. In terms of, this is something we've discussed with management too. Like within the context of the bonus, bonus idea, for lack of a better term. Some sort of incentive to sort of keep people here. Because on the one hand, we're worried about recruiting and retaining new employees, but we're also worried about keeping the employees that we have. So we also are proposing a longevity step that would be, a 10, a 15, and a 20-year step, for lack of a better term. And right now we proposed it at 6%. And that is what it is, and certainly open to counter proposals. But I think that like having some sort of longevity step, I think would be something that would help keep longer term employees, like Debbie here working with the district. People who wouldn't necessarily, see an increase based on their steps. And it's certainly something that, that I've seen utilized by many employers. So there's also like, we're trying to include everything that we potentially include in terms of economic proposals. So another thing we wouldn't mind seeing is parity with the teachers on insurance opt-out money. From what is it now for us?
The opt-out, it's 100, 150, or 200 based on your hour. 200 for full time. 150 for 3/4 and then 100 for half.
Yeah, so I mean, the 300 comes, straight from the teacher's contract. Another thing that we'd be interested in is having like the wage insurance go back to the pool. I don't know, Melanie, can you speak to that real?
Well, currently, the way it works, and I think this has been adjusted, Michelle, help me out there, that the opt-out, if we opt out because our spouses or we have another insurance somewhere, we get that little piece of money back toward us. If you waive your insurance, and I think it's people on OHP or people that are not allowed legally to be reimbursed for not taking insurance, that money, we don't get a piece of that money. It just goes back into the general fund. But we'd like to see that money come into our pool to help buy down the cost of insurance for those that need to take it, especially those that are like supporting the family or their children or grandchildren, things like that. So can you speak to the wage?
Yeah, so currently the district contribution to the pool, similar to an opt-out or waive, is already going into the pool. It's
Okay.
it's the employee opt-out stipend of 200 a month, but you're right, it's not going anywhere. So I'm understanding that you would ask for both, so a double contribution to the pool for waives.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, to sort of summarize my rather long remarks that I came up with at 5 o'clock this morning when I woke up. I just, I want you guys to see this as our initial proposal. I don't want it to shut down the conversation, and I really want it to more be an example of like all the different ideas that we have at our disposal to come to a settlement. Personally, I know that they're not going to include all of this stuff, and I think as a team, we recognize that. But there are different elements from various parts of it that, that we could use. And there are other ideas too. There's ideas like using, because one of the things that's hard for us is that like, a 2 or 4 or 6% increase is different depending on where you are on the wage scale. A 2.5 for teachers is a very different thing than a 2.5 for classified. In terms of cost and the impact on the check, the check that you get. I mean, we could do, there are ideas that we've had about doing like a straight dollar amount. For people under a certain threshold, say. I've certainly seen settlements like that happen. I mean, there's
We
also,
did that once here too. Didn't we one time do X amount instead of a percent? I mean, that also collapses your salary schedule to some degree also.
it does, I mean, and and it makes it mystifying for somebody like me who's trying to figure out the logic behind the salary schedule.
Yeah.
But, but it is a way to sometimes give a more equitable wage increase when you have a big range of how people are paid. So that's an idea too. I mean, another idea that we've sort of kicked around that, that we haven't proposed, but it's certainly out there is the 6% pickup. And I'm not proposing that, but that is there. And certainly a lot of your comparative, districts do pay the 6% pickup. And there are some advantageous reasons why they do that. Some political, some financial. But so that's as much as I'll say about that. But I think our overall goal is really, the same as the district. Like we want to, we want increases for our members. We also really, we want to address the staffing crisis that the district is in. We want to rectify some of the inequities that exist in the labor market, which we think we'll get to that. We also really support the idea behind the bilingual stipend in trying to sort of shift the culture of the district towards a more bilingual workforce. But it's, that's the hard thing is that it's, all these things are coming out of the same pot of money. So, I don't know if anyone else-
Said what we've already in the presentation, how we feel, and how our unit feels.
Yeah, I mean, just on that last, Rob, you said it all comes out of the same pot. I mean, I guess my initial kind of gut reaction, besides I understand a lot of the things that you're talking about in the position that you're in when we're talking about making choices and how do we allocate resources. And we have been impacted by a lot of things, rate of inflation being higher, pandemic causing people to have different choices in work habits and what jobs they want. One thing it hasn't impacted is how much money the district has, right? The ability to pay or the pot of money has not grown because of all of these external factors. We have ESSER funds, but I hope we can all recognize ESSER funds are not an ongoing sustainable source of money that you could ever base salary increases on. It'd be foolish. It'd be like paying your mortgage or your rent with your savings account. At some point, you're going to run out and then you have no money because it doesn't get renewed year after year. So when we look at available resources, we're primarily looking at that state, what we get from the state, which hasn't changed. It hasn't changed because inflation went up. It hasn't changed because it's harder to find employees at all levels. So we're still left with the amount of money that we have from the state to spend. That's still always going to be a kind of a constraint for us. And then trying to solve the various problems that you brought up. How do we attract employees? How do we retain employees? In light of our limited resources. And I hope that we're logic-based and not emotion-based in making those decisions. And that's, when we look at the wage study, I understand if somebody is not getting as big of an increase as somebody else in the wage study, that there can be feelings of, that's not fair, but it's logic-based. It's based on what those comparative wages are with other similar positions in the market. So it's logic-based. And I guess I hope that we can try and bargain from that logic-based standpoint rather than, it's not fair if one person gets a bigger increase than I do, standpoint. That's tough because that doesn't have any logic to it. I understand that reaction, but it doesn't have any logic to it. And it doesn't solve any of the problems that we've been talking about. You know, how do we attract people to hard to fill positions, and how do we retain people who might go to another district because they can make more in that other district than they make here? You know, those are very real problems, I think, that I think we're all looking to solve. So I hope that the solutions we come up with are tailored to solve problems, you know, in a logical way.
I mean, we're in this position now because of the past, some of the past bargaining sessions with, or, you know, bargaining, bargaining sessions, yeah. That were, you know, really low COLAs, low, you know, it's like, I realize you guys get only a certain amount of money, but that's whenever you guys need to rethink how you budget that money. I mean, I know budgets can be tweaked to a point, but you've got to start valuing your classified staff. You've got to start paying them to not have to work 2 different jobs just to survive. You've got to start treating us the same way that you treat the licensed. If the licensed are valued at this amount, then, and the admin too, you guys are all paid well, right? So I mean, I feel like that needs to be, I'm not saying that we should be getting admin paid, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, your value, where's our value, right? That's what we're hearing. Where is our value in this big picture?
I think when we look at that question, that brings the wage study back into play, because the question is, are the positions paid competitively and comparatively with similar positions in the economy? And that would be true whether we're talking admin, that would be true, we look at that with teachers, we look at that with admin. Are we paying fair market rate for that position? Because there's reasons why different positions in the district are paid different, right? Responsibility, education, number of hours. I mean, that's true in the economy as a whole, right? And so to me, the value is, are we paying fair compared to how others pay these positions in the market? Which is what that wage study was designed to kind of hone in on, which is why it's been a focus for us in our proposal. We want to pay our admin fair market wages. We want to pay our teachers fair market wages. We want to pay our classified fair market wages. And so we look at those comparators. We talked about that when we presented to the license group. Here's where we see how Hillsborough stacks up with competitors. So that was part of the basis for our proposal there. So to me, that is showing value, is we are paying and attempting to pay competitively with how those jobs are paid in the marketplace.
To a point, because this was pre-pandemic that we worked on this, and we worked very hard on it, I agree. But it's pre-pandemic, and it was a joint effort, 100% all the way. But it was pre-pandemic, things are different now. People are ponying up more money for this. This study, you know what it showed me? It showed me that the classified employees as a unit, they're all underpaid at every district. They're all underpaid.
As compared to
what a livable wage should be.
Right.
I mean,
Okay,
yeah, she's talking not within Hillsborough, she's saying it across districts.
yeah, across districts. I mean, some were, you know, I mean, there were some that, you know, HSD really stunk with wages. But there were some that I saw in other districts that even were worse. So I mean,
Right.
you know, I understand that part, but it's like, until, you know, we're just playing catch up. And also the same with the salary study, what I feel like is you're trying to cram in this adjustment when it should be. I feel like the 3 year, the time that it takes to get to that point, we're gonna be behind still. Even though you say that it's going to be balanced, I don't think so. But you know, I'm just speaking from a classified view and what we're hearing. It's like, you know, they don't feel that they're paid what they should be. And if you want to be the district, if people come to you to work, and you want to be the ones that keeps, employees here, and you want to be, play with the big dogs, you gotta be a big dog, right? You gotta help.
But it also goes, fulfilling the value, it goes beyond the pay too. We hear every day, at least, 6, 7 times a week, sometimes multiple times a day. People want to know what's going on. They're leaving the district. They have not put in their resignations yet. They're waiting for the time, whatever their personal timing is. But they're not feeling valued. And these are the words that they're using. It's like, well, they don't appreciate me here, so why should I stay? And they're getting emotional while they're talking to me about it, which in turn puts me in an emotional state, which, yeah, we're talking emotions, but we're talking people's salaries, we're talking their money, we're talking their livelihood. We have people that are working 3 jobs. Well, they leave here and they go to another job. They can't stay and work extra here because they've got another job where they have to go help some kids with their home care. And then they have a job on the weekends of whatever store that, they've gotten a job at. But just yesterday, one told me, I'm gonna put him, I can't stay. They don't value me here. So this is just gonna, these numbers up here just show them that at least it's a direction of feeling valued. The feeling value is gonna go beyond that. It's gonna be feeling heard, feeling that when they talk to somebody, that it's not just going over their head or they're looking into glazed eyes and nobody's really caring about what they say. It goes beyond these numbers on feeling valued. And that's not something that the salary study looked at. We didn't even get into that part of stuff on it. And you
Yeah, I mean,
really can't measure that.
Yeah, it's difficult for me to respond to that. I don't know why a given person is not feeling valued in their particular assignment. Could be a variety of factors. Debbie, I feel like some of the issues that you're bringing up, you're asking the district to solve societal or overall economic. Why are these positions in an economy paid different than these positions in the economy? And should the district kind of, equalize that? I mean, it all still comes from a limited funding source. We could pay your bargaining unit members 3 times what we currently do. And then we would have 1/3 of the number of those bargaining unit members. We could agree to a settlement that then immediately put us in a position of laying off 1/3 of your bargaining unit. That's not going to help those folks, not going to help kids. We have a finite source of money. We're not a private corporation. We're not Intel deciding how much revenue should we kick back to shareholders or something like that. District spends what it gets, keeps an ending fund balance because you'd be foolish not to. I don't think anybody would ever argue we should keep no ending fund balance or spend every dollar we get every year, because then when the roof collapses or something happens, you have no money to account for that. But these are our public funds and they are a limited funding source. So, asking the district to sort of, overexpend, it's not going to be a solution. It's going to result in less jobs. It's going to result in less bargaining unit members. It's going to result in less services to kids.
Yeah. I mean, if you guys have the problem to really, or the power to address those kind of social problems, that'd be great. I mean, we'd like that power too. I mean, we make our own small incremental, fight in that bigger battle against just inequity in general. And part of it, I think, is a lot of what's coming to a head in the Great Resignation or whatever you want to call the time period we're existing right now. I think is that society is running into these issues where we don't value, and certainly in this state in the way that it funds education. I mean, and a lot of people who remember what Oregon education was like 30 years ago, it was very different. Maybe 40 years ago.
I totally agree with that there is an underfunding of the education system as a whole, an undervaluing of it by the legislature. until we get funded differently at the legislative level, we're always gonna be quarreling with each other over a limited and insufficient pool of money. I mean, that's the challenge of public sector bargaining always. We're left to argue over a pool of money that is finite and too small.
But you gotta do better.
Well, but we're also.
But Debbie, I don't know what you mean by we gotta do better. We can't get more money.
I don't know, you guys gotta figure that budget. I don't know what else to tell you. I just know our people need to not work 3-4 different jobs. Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, AFT Oregon is working to put a lobby day together, whether we join forces with OSEA or OEA, or
We
we're
are
trying to
allies.
put these things together. We've got some K-12 issues that we're taking to legislation. It just takes time to put these things together because it's a short session this year. And so it may get pushed to the long session, but we're putting something together because we're gonna go tell our stories to them. And we're gonna tell them that this has got to change. It's on the backs of the classified employees of these districts that are forced to work 2-3 jobs. And so may I read a statement, because you were asking about the undervalue that they're feeling. This person would like to remain anonymous, and so I'm going to respect that from them, but I will read this to you. So I started with the district as an EA in 1995, and I've remained a loyal and dedicated employee despite the changes, reductions in hours and positions over the past 26 years. Even during the times when the classified hours were cut and jobs were reclassified and we were called on to do numerous tasks, so many of us remained committed, dedicated, and gave HSD our best years and our best work. So much so that I was even nominated for the Crystal Apple Award, and so many other long-timers have been as well. While we appreciate the recognition of our coworkers, we feel that everyone should not just be recognized, but compensated for their longevity and hard work and loyalty for decades. I have had many opportunities to do other things, but I'm committed to the HSD community, students, and families. I feel like many of our underserved and underrepresented families are accustomed to people bailing on them and not investing in their future, and I did not want to be just one more person who did that to them. So I have stayed steady, strong, and supportive of our families through many other personal challenges in my life. Many have. Still, at 10 years, instead of being rewarded for our years of faithful service and commitment, we are tapped out as far as salaries go. After over 25 years of working in HSD and now doing the job of a specialist for a classified pay, my salary is so low that I actually qualify for low-income housing. Many of us do, even if we don't take advantage of it, and most of us don't because we want to leave such benefits for the families who we serve for our school community. The point, the very fact that we long-term employees would even fall into the category just does not seem fair. We are getting everything, you are getting everything from us, but it is not right for you to exploit our love for what we do and the school community we serve by undercompensating us. Please be reasonable. That's all we ask, reasonable and fair. That's from a long-term employee. I know this lady personally, and it breaks my heart to hear her say this. And this is the feeling of many classified, not just SEAs, many. And so
These are the people that we are sitting here trying to represent. Right? That's just one.
that's one.
Yeah, I think in the bargains that in the past and in this bargain, I mean, I think what you hear from the district side is an extreme sense of value for the work that the classified employees do. This district could not run without classified employees, simply couldn't.
Right.
Hugely valuable. We are still, in all the decisions that we make, it would be easy for our side to say, God, you guys are right. Let's double the pay of all of our employees. We would have to, there's consequences to that. Again, we would immediately turn around and lay off hundreds of people if we did that. I mean, there are consequences. You say, do better, go big, do better. We are always,
Go big, I didn't say.
you said if we want to be the big dog,
Well,
we gotta pay
you
like
got-
the big
you got-
dog.
If you wanna run with the big dogs. you gotta
Yeah.
be the big dog, yeah.
And we always are going to be responsible and act within the funds that are allocated. Michelle, that's her job. The board trusts her to say, what is responsible to spend within the budget that we're given a budget by the state. We don't have the ability to raise taxes. We don't have the ability to raise revenue. And so we have a confined funding source. If we're irresponsible with that, it hurts everybody in the system. Hurts kids, hurts your members.
I totally agree, but you say take the emotion out of it. We can't. We can't, when we hear letters like this, and we have others that we've received, we can't take the emotion out of it because they can't take the emotion out of it. Some leave because of the emotion. So,
I don't think you can ignore the emotional pieces of it, but I think decisions need to be informed and logic-based also.
correct.
In
Well,
in why we come to
the balance.
decisions.
Well, and not even, I mean, not necessarily emotion, but when we look at sustainability. Like, I can love my job, I can love this district, I can be loyal and work here for 26 years, but if I can't sustain my family on my income, I might have to leave. We might all have to leave. because
Absolutely,
We can't sustain that. You know,
yeah,
so it's not even so much emotion as like, you're saying logic. Logic says I get paid this much here, and they should be equal, but sustainability says we have to be paid a livable wage or we cannot continue to do this. So I think that's what we're trying to advocate.
Right.
Project comes from the bills.
So,
yeah, understood. And also, we know that many people work in a school environment for reasons far beyond what the wage that's earned. There's a value received from working as part of the system, improving lives of kids. There are other, benefits to working in a public school system, being part of PERS, the hours that people have that they may want to be done with a work day in time for their kids, to get off school and things like that. There are a lot of reasons why people work in a school environment. And you're right, we have to, and we're struggling with that right now. How do we attract people? How do we retain people? But again, every decision that we make is always going to lead back to what are the resources, the dependable and sustainable resources that we have to spend. And that's what makes this job of bargaining in the public sector so difficult, because again, we're left to argue over a pot of money that we have no control over, A, and B, is insufficient. It's that way with every employee group. It's that way the teachers would say the same thing. They are saying the same thing to us.
I mean, same story with Aspen.
Right.
All of them.
well, yeah, and then when we go to Salem and we say we need more money, they say, yeah, so does that group, so does that group. So does that
Right.
group. So they still have a set amount of money. We're just here advocating for our group, just as the teachers are advocating for their group. So, yeah, that's where we sit with this. I don't know if you guys have others to add, anything else to add, it's 11:00 and.
No, I mean,
I think we said-
counter, we look forward to the counter.
Yeah. We said what we need to say, because we just keep repeating the same thing.
Yeah,
So-
and
And I think we all feel very similar emotions over this, that people need to get paid more. But on the flip side too, they need to feel valued more too. There was another one that just left the district because she couldn't get, she wants to take vacation time or a few days here and there. And there's not just a single time that, so, okay.
I think for just a second, if I can speak on the value thing, from a personal perspective, right? When I got hired, I was an athletic secretary 3. I worked with athletics. I supported the main office whenever I could, but most of the time I was in athletics. When you guys changed the names and we became admin support too, now I can get called to the office at any time. I'm supposed to be able to be the principal secretary, the receptionist, the attendance secretary, and if I got the training, I'd be the health aide, right? So I could potentially be pulled to 2 or 3 other jobs during the day, which I'm happy to support, but I see my husband who's a teacher, if he gets pulled into another classroom for 1 period during the day, he gets an extra $60. I get nothing and I don't get my job done. There's not a value there, right? And so that's where when we do that, we're like, why is it that we see them getting paid? And in this case, It's all in the same budget, except for we budget, well, their salary, so they get extra money and you are on that time, but your time, even though you can't get this done, and now you have to work at home, right? Like, that's why you're not supposed to work when you're not working. Well, the job doesn't get done. And if we don't do the jobs, you guys can't do your jobs. They have to get done. So I see that. And then another minor, little things, like at the beginning of the year, all staff, let's get all the staff together. We're gonna do all the introductions. We're gonna have all the teachers get to meet each other. I work with those teachers every day, right? I'm working in the front office, I'm working in my office. I'm communicating and connecting with them. I've never even seen the teachers because the classified staff were not invited to the all staff, let's meet each other. That's the value. Like, we are the staff. We put all staff together. You bring them together, introduce everybody, so I can say, oh, that's Mrs. Dutchland. Or like, I walked through the halls the other day and I saw her name on the wall and I was like, I've never even heard of this person. Let alone when I know who they are when they walk through my office with a badge, and I'm, who are you, stranger, that's coming through? So like, it's not that necessarily money. Neither of those are necessarily money. It's the expectations that you throw onto us, where we're supposed to support and know who people are and defend things, but we have never even been introduced. Like, I don't know who this is.
Yeah.
And they don't know why. And when they need something, they don't feel comfortable to come to me. And I want them to feel that too. It's a mutual respect thing.
Sure. Yeah, I understand that point. Some of the other pieces that you were talking about the feeling valued, the cutting of hours and the collapsing of duties, again, those were all funding related decisions. Many of you have been here for a long time. You remember the years where Michelle or her predecessor would have to come to bargaining and say, we are going to have like $12 million or more less this year than we had last year. I mean, those were all products of very difficult decisions that were designed to keep as many people working and as many services going to kids as possible. But an organization that gets repeatedly told, you have millions of dollars less to spend next year than you had last year. Yet we know costs go up throughout the system and throughout the economy. The impossibility of cobbling that together without impacting people, without impacting hours, without collapsing positions and collapsing duties, it's not possible.
Right. I remember 2003 when my son started kindergarten, 17 days off the end of the school year. I had to tell my 5-year-old why he wasn't going to the pumpkin patch.
Absolutely.
And all of his older cousins had all gone. He was looking forward to going to the pumpkin patch. And so I remember I've seen the downward. I wasn't in the district as an employee, but I was as a parent.
Same with outdoor school, it's got, it's the
a week.
so.
And again, what I'm trying to, I think the point I'm trying to make is the challenge on our side is to come to a fair economic settlement that doesn't break the system, that doesn't negatively impact the system. And I think it's one thing to say, our members would like this, our members would like this, our members would like this, they'd like this. We have to figure out how to pay for all of that. We have to figure out how to pay for the settlement we agreed to in a way that's not going to break the system. Right? That's hard. You guys don't have to, I hope you worry about that. I hope you think about that in making your proposal, but ultimately that responsibility falls on this side of the table and not yours. How do we pay for the things that we agreed to in a way that doesn't result in dozens of jobs lost, services not going to kids, buildings continuing to fall into disrepair, things like that. So our proposals don't come from a sense of, let's see how much money we can keep from them. Let's see how low of a settlement we can get. That's never our conversation. Our conversation is what is affordable within the budget. And then we end up going beyond that inevitably. Every time, Michelle makes a budget, we end up going beyond it, right? It drives Michelle crazy, I know. But it's not a goal of our team to see how little of a settlement we can come to with your group, just for the sport of it, or just to be mean-spirited. It's what's affordable within a budget.
Yeah, I mean, and personally, I've seen a lot of budgets that, personally, I support conservative budgeting. I support a healthy organization having a healthy amount of money. Because crises happen, and we see quite a few in our lifetime, our careers, where we see that it's important. So it's, our goal is not to bankrupt the, district or force the district to do layoffs or, anything like that. It's also like, we also just feel like we're also being put in an awkward position, like the bilingual stipend, I think is a great idea. I think the team all thinks it's a great idea. But we also don't want to be put in a position where we're going to say no to it because we choose something else, and the same is true of the market study too, like the bilingual thing is hard because we don't know how much it's going to cost. We don't know what's going to happen if suddenly it costs way more than the district thought. Are we then going to be like back at the table?
Yeah, and just to clarify on that point, we've never really tried to cost. So we didn't really say, hey, let's propose X%. We could have proposed Y%, but because we're doing this bilingual stipend, we're going to propose X% instead. We never attributed a specific cost to that bilingual stipend.
I know, but and that seems weird to me. Why would you propose something that you don't even know if you can afford it?
Because of the enormous value we see in it.
Okay, but that's something that.
Well, I guess.
But listen, but whatever that,
What the heck?
whatever that cost, Debbie, whatever the cost of that bilingual stipend is, it is much smaller than adding another % or 2% or 3% on to the salary schedule. Whatever the cost of that bilingual stipend turns out to be, it's not, that money couldn't have gone to make large scale salary schedule changes or adjustments.
Yeah, but I guess it's hard when we see like, when we see a cost applied to it in terms of like a costing formula that shows sort of how much a COLA is going to cost, how much steps are going to cost, and then how much that's going to cost, and it sort of like comes out of, essentially it comes out of the COLA or whatever else is part of the settlement.
I asked a question about the bilingual because that piece keeps coming up, and I guess a question that I have, a wondering that I have is the bilingual stipend meant to represent a shift in morals and a shift in values, human values, not just dollars? That's a question that I have as I hear that conversation coming up.
I think it's certainly meant to I don't know if it's a shift, but an emphasis on supporting our students of color, our students from different backgrounds. I mean, I think that's absolutely part of the district's core mission and emphasis right now.
But I just asked that question because I keep hearing that topic coming up on both sides. But
Yeah.
as I'm hearing it, as I'm hearing the arguments going forth, it's not about money. It doesn't occur that way for me. I'm not bilingual. I only speak English, but I would just put, for me, it doesn't occur to me about money, but I'm wondering if it's meant to be just a more of a moral shift. I mean, and I appreciate your language, but that's just a question, wondering that I have. Are we trying to just shift the direction of just human value, morals, and then having people who can speak bilingually and be able to communicate with those students and families? Might that not make our community feel, our bilingual community members feel more welcome and involved? So that's just a question I have.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because when we're talking about money coming from the same pot, for us, it's not a matter of, okay, well, don't do that bilingual stipend and instead add a 0.25% to the salary schedule, because what's lost in that is that goal, right? And so I guess to some degree you do make value statements and judgments, but so the same with the market study. You could say, well, don't spend any money on the market adjustments and instead put it to the general salary increase. Then you would not be solving the core problem that we have, where we have some of our positions that are underpaid. We have some of our positions that are overpaid compared to the market. We have some positions that are underpaid. We took that market study money, put it to a general salary increase. We're not solving the problem that we have of filling hard to fill positions.
I mean, I agree with that.
I think we should be in a stopping point.
Sure, we have gone beyond our time.
I have one question before we go. The bilingual stipend, because it isn't a continuum for the income for somebody, could that come out of ESSER funds? For the 3 years?
I don't know if it could while those funds existed. I would defer to Michelle on what we can use those ESSER funds.
So it's not ongoing yet. So
Yeah.
if it were to become ongoing, then we could reevaluate, but if we have ESSER funds that cover that cost for this 3 year time period.
I don't know. I know things like hiring incentives for certain positions can come out of ESSER funds, which is why you see that as being the chosen method in many other districts. Those are one-time costs. They can come out of one-time pools of money. They're not an ongoing expense, which is, that's why that's the go-to for Beaverton. Let's offer up, you know, X $1,000 for subs or for bus drivers or whatever, one-time cost. So I don't know if bilingual stipend, as long as ESSER funds exist, whether that can come out of that.
I think that'd be something worth looking into, Michelle, just, I think that's it. Michelle, I think Michelle's got a good idea. I think if that could, you know, that could be, you know, something to look at.
But I do want to honor our time, so thank you for bringing us back to that. So
Stop.